I've been aware of the Yakuza series for a few years now. People talk about it on Twitter like they're the greatest games ever made. After seeing a trailer for Yakuza Like a Dragon, my original thought was that every game had a new main character and cast you hang out with, since I remember seeing one of the older games with a different main character. However, I learned that they're all connected shortly after, and I was a bit intimidated because that's a lot of games to play if I ended up liking it. But I ended up biting the bullet one day when I saw that Yakuza 0 was on sale and decided that I'd start with that game since it's the origin story and I feel like that's the best way to start. And I won't lie, my expectations for it were a bit high given how many people I saw singing its praises. I usually try my best to not let that happen, however it was a little difficult. But hey, I liked the game. A lot. You could even say I loved it. It has pretty fun combat, has a banger soundtrack, and an extremely captivating story. So, with all that said, it's time for all things Yakuza 0. Kiryu and Dishi are orphans and get brought into the Dojima family by Kazama, the captain of the Dojima family, and they begin working as low-level Yakuza, taking on jobs for a loan shark. However, he and Nishiki overhear the news that the man Kiryu roughed up is now dead, and the top dogs aren't very pleased to hear that. He tries to convince them that he's been set up, which doesn't really work in his favor. Kuze, next in line to become the Dojima captain, tells Kiryu to turn himself in, but instead decides to confront the loan shark, which again doesn't end well. However, he learns that Kuze wants him to spy on Kazama so he can learn how to get the empty lot, which is important because whoever manages to get that land will become very rich. But seeing as Kiryu owes his life to Kazama, he obviously turns him down, and decides it's best to cut himself off from the Yakuza to help prove Kazama's innocence. However, all accountability goes onto his name, which puts him in quite a pickle. Kiryu shortly after runs into Tachibana, who wants Kiryu's help to get the empty lot, and in exchange, will help him prove his innocence along with Kazama's by catching the culprit behind the murder in the empty lot. However, this story is not just Kiryu's. You'll also follow Goro Majima, who is the manager of an extremely fancy club. Although he seems to be enjoying life, it is merely all a facade so he can get money to pay his way back into the Yakuza. But plans change and he ends up having to do more. What those plans are, well, I won't spoil, since I think his backstory is far more interesting and is left best experienced than said. The story is super interesting and does very good at keeping you compelled. The only complaint I had with it is that the beginning has very weird pacing. It lays a bunch of stuff on you all at once, doesn't really explain what stuff is, and it's a bit hard to keep track of what's going on since it's just thing after thing after thing happening. But that's only for like the first 2 hours. After that, it's super captivating, and they take time to explain all the things that happened. And even after I felt like the story couldn't get any crazier, it fucking does every time. It feels very fresh, to me at least. I can't remember the last time I experienced a story this batshit insane. The way some of the chapters end just kept reeling me in further and further. I didn't want to stop playing because I wanted to see what happened next. And honestly, I didn't think this was the kind of game to make me cry, but fuck man. The goddamn acting is so good. There's no English dub, so I obviously had to read subtitles, but these actors were fucking amazing. They made me cry with their performance in some of the more emotional scenes. The ending is fucking incredible too. It has so many twists and turns that come out of left field. There was only one thing that happened that was very convenient and made the story go on for a bit longer when it felt like it was wrapping up. But other than that, it was very solid all around. The moment I was able to freely walk around Kamurocho, it was like I had just arrived in the Neon Paradise myself. I was very lost, but completing sub-stories and the main missions will definitely help you get to know your way around Kamurocho better. And the city feels very alive. There are people going about the day and talking with one another around every corner. If you ever find yourself wanting to have some fun after some very serious story shenanigans, then you can, because there's a lot of activities to do in the city. From trying to finish the alcoholism Pokédex, singing your heart out with some karaoke, you can even try to win some stuff at the arcade, or Along with all that are side stories you'll come across while just exploring the city, each one putting our dashing protagonists into very strange situations. But goddamn are they a good time. They have just as much attention put into them as the actual story. There are a lot of them too, and they manage to make most of them quite different. You'll go from sneaking into a cult and beating the shit out of their leader, to giving a child a toy from the arcade, or trying not to get caught while buying a questionable magazine. They'll reward you with gear that'll help you survive the streets, or sometimes the reward is just the act of being a good person. There are in-game achievements called CP that you'll complete by just playing the game, and they'll allow you to spend it on various things to make running around town easier and make fights more worthwhile. But I never really found a reason to go out of my way to do them, because a lot of the stuff ends up being more expensive than what it's worth in my opinion. Later on in the game, you won't have to fight nearly as much to become rich. Kiryu will become a real estate agent and Majima becomes a manager of a cabaret club. Both will be eventually making you millions of yen passively, although Majima's is more involved since it's more of a mini game. It's such a nice feeling when you're just casually making tens of millions of yen. I felt like an actual businessman. Money is everything in Yakuza. It allows you to obviously buy things like food, weapons, and whatnot, but most importantly, it allows you to expand your moveset by purchasing abilities and upgrades in the skill tree. It can be quite hard to remember all of your moves in the heat of battle since every stance has its own set of moves. With enough practice, however, it'll come to you like second nature. Make sure you always have food or medicine on you, otherwise you'll be limping across town. Oh shit! No, please leave me alone, Mr. Shakedown. The combat is super fun, genuinely, like some of the most fun I've had playing an action game. There's quite a bit of freedom when it comes to how you want to play. Both Kiryu and Majima have 3 stances they can use, all being a little different between the character. Majima is much more quick, flashy, and just has more fun with his moves compared to Kiryu's professionalism. Like, this motherfucker just straight up breakdances. Kiryu has a nice weight behind every punch, like, seriously, it feels like you're breaking someone's jaw with some of them. And although your fists are tools of destruction, it doesn't hurt to get an even bigger advantage on your foes by getting yourself a weapon. They do a nice chunk of damage, however they do have durability so they will break, which is why it's nice to always have multiple on you. The heat system is really good, it honestly helped me get better at the combat. If you get hit or don't attack for a little bit, the bar will go down, meaning you can't do heat explosion moves, which are really good for taking out enemies quickly. So it was always a reminder to block attacks, which I forgot I could do, instead of just dodging out of the way. For some reason, like halfway through the game, I noticed Majima's heat gauge just stopped going up. And turns out the calming towel stops you from gaining heat, and I didn't know that until I looked it up. I wish I had a better description that said that because I had no clue and I thought it was a bug the whole time. Each stance has their use for sure, depending on the environment and how many enemies you're facing. However, I never really found much reason to switch between them unless the situation called for it. But since you don't really get much money early on, I found it better to just crank one's abilities up more than the others and stick to that. The bosses are extremely fun, albeit some definitely got on my nerves at times because they wouldn't let me combo them, but that's probably just me not being very good at the game, which is no fault of Yakuza. They're also the only time I felt like I had to use every move at my disposal to overcome an enemy. The choreography during the fights is pretty fucking dope too. You always have to be on your toes because a QTE might get thrown at you out of nowhere. I do appreciate that they don't overuse them, and it only happens sometimes during the game. I felt that some of the repeat boss fights were a bit unnecessary and were just there for the sake of having a fight. I'm very glad that after years of hearing people praise these games that I finally tried one and it lived up to the expectations. Although it's definitely still too early to tell for me if I'll enjoy the entire series since this is the only one I've played. But god damn am I looking forward to the rest. And Jesus Christ, suddenly my backlog gained like 8 new games.